This is War Room Moments, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and most relevant people on the planet, hear their stories, and get the most important business lessons they have learned on their road to success, and get exclusive advice on how to implement their success into your life and business. War Room Moments is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board. Here's your host, Jason Miller.
Hey, welcome to today's episode of War Room Moments. My name is Jason Miller, your podcast host, and today I have Heidi with us today. Heidi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me, Jason.
Awesome. Well, hey, I do a really bad job of introducing people, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself. So introduce yourself to the audience and tell the audience what your superpower is.
Well, I'm Heidi Glunz. I am the owner of Science2Wellbeing, and my superpower is being able to help people uncover their values and be able to decide how they want to better fulfill their lives through those values. We actually believe that people have two sets of values, your core values and your acquired values, and sometimes those acquired values get a little sticky. And whether or not they're serving you and bringing you fulfillment is really our mission. How do we help you understand that and decide what you want to do with that?
Yeah, what mama and daddy taught you, right?
Or your generation,
or your generation,
culture,
yeah.
or the organization you're in.
Yeah, true. I often think about, you think about your whole life, right? You might be, depending on your situation, family situation, but like our kids are 5 and 3, right? And they've been at home with us since they've been born, basically. I mean, they went to preschool and all that stuff, but then you think about, because you've got to influence their values the whole time, right? And now you're going to put them in school and you don't really for sure 100% know what values are getting introduced to them, right, in that school environment. So it's a very interesting conversation to talk about values. I was in the military for 23 years. The values there were probably a lot different than what most people live by, right? But I'm interested to really get your take on what you see from that standpoint of values and leveraging that massive education that you have.
Well, acquired values are really interesting because first and foremost, we don't believe that any values are bad. There are true principles that exist behind every value. The real struggle is when you start to distort it. It starts to become a caricature of itself, or you start to exhibit obsessive behaviors around a certain value that really start to dominate your life, and they crowd out those things that feel more natural, more intrinsic, or it's part of your psychological DNA, if you will. But you're listening to all of these external messages and you start to internalize them to the point where they're not serving you. They're not really creating a healthy, happy fulfillment. You're doing it because you have to. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. And so that's where the danger comes in. It's not that the principle still isn't true, that there isn't some nugget of truth there. It's that we have taken it and twisted it with some messaging that hasn't really served us in a great way. For instance, my previous career was as a project manager for, I was in the nuclear industry. Safety is paramount in everything that we do. It's a fundamental value of any organization in the nuclear industry, because we want to make sure that the public feels safe with the technology, and it makes a lot of sense. What happens, though, is people start to take that to the nth degree. So instead of creating a product that's safe, but also efficient and viable, they puts safety as paramount, and then it raises the cost of everything, and it makes it much more difficult to get it out into the public. And in some ways, I think it has the opposite effect, in that because we have to spend so much money to make it safe, it seems less safe. So it gets just a little bit distorted on the back end. It's not that the principle isn't well founded. It's just, how far do you take this particular principle? For me, it showed up as security. Everything I did growing up, why I went to college, why I went to the nuclear industry, was around safety. My first job, I was so excited. It was super secure. It was never going to go anywhere. And I realized at one point that that wasn't really serving me anymore. I was choosing jobs or choosing money or choosing the things that were more safe and secure, instead of going after those things that felt more natural and genuine to myself and would really help me feel that fulfillment and achieve the security that I wanted.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation in the times we are, right? With technology, how plugged in we are, all these things. And how do you view that? How do you navigate? How would you tell people to navigate all of that while still keeping a core value with all of this noise constantly every day? I mean, we all get it, right? So it's how do we deal with it? How do we compartmentalize it? How do we figure out value-based things that are that should fit our values? Maybe they're on the fringe of it, right? I'm interested in your take on that.
Well, I do think that we live in interesting times, because in the past, we've acquired our values from first our parents, and then sort of our peer groups, going to school and those things going on in the world that were starting to influence our generation and the culture that we were raised in. Nowadays, cultures are getting much more homogenized, right? The generations are much more homogenized. It used to be, when we talked about generations, we typically were talking about Western generations. Now that's not true. We're becoming much more global in that. So there's a lot more influence on different aspects that can start to create acquired values for you. And I do think social media can become sort of an echo chamber, depending on who you're looking for guidance, who's influencing your thought patterns, what you're listening to. And sometimes the algorithms actually reinforce that behavior, because if you like one thing, it's going to send you more of the same thing that you like, instead of sort of diversify your points of view. So it becomes very easy to get caught up in the trap of likes, I would say, where if I just act this way, or if I internalize this message, everyone's going to like me. Well, everyone who happens to be in this close group that you're in, but you're not seeing outside of that bubble either. So I do think between, we consume media all day long now. It used to be you just got advertisements when you watched TV, or, drove down the street and saw a billboard, or I guess radio too. But now you're on the internet, every website, there's an ad. So we have to be very diligent in looking at what are these influences, and starting to ask yourself the questions, is this true for me? Is this how I think that value should be represented? Does this actually lift me up and fulfill me in a way that is supporting long-term happiness, or am I just getting those quick hits of dopamine? And this takes some self-awareness. Unfortunately, for young people, they haven't had enough experience or time even to just sort out what is my core values and what is starting to embed these messages in my mind. And even some adults have never really taken the time to really sit back and think about what was really important to me and what did I just sort of pick up along the way. So that's really the first step, asking yourself, okay, in my gut, in my body, in my psyche, how does this true principle work for me? And does it? And if it doesn't, Do I need to find a different way to embody that principle that does fit better for me? And another real key indicator that you've picked up some sort of acquired value would be when you start talking about shoulds. Anytime that tape starts playing in your head that says, I should be this, I should be that, I should be on Instagram, I should be better looking, I should be more diverse, I should be whatever it is. Anytime there's a should that starts to pop up for you, that's a really good indicator that you've picked something up that's external. Because when it comes from your core value, it's not a should, it just is. Your core values don't go anywhere. They might get pushed back and, have to wait to emerge, but they don't have to be that loud, noisy mind chatter. They don't have to be that tape in your head because they're part of you. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah. I wonder often if, well, now that, this makes total sense, right? And it gets my brain housing group and gears spinning in my head. What is the connection between values and today's instant self-gratification, right? Because you see a lot of it, right? It is, I can tell you, just like my kids watch YouTube, very educational things on YouTube, right? But as soon as a commercial comes on, oh my God, the freaking world is going to melt down. It's like it was right in the middle of a sentence and it's like a volcano just exploded. And all you hear is, Dad, skip. Well, when I was a kid, I was my dad's remote. So I was the remote. I was the guy that got a beer for him. I was all that, right? So, looking at how do those things correlate today to the values of society that we have?
I think this, first of all, let's go back to brain chemistry. Because in your brain, you have several chemicals. You have oxytocin, you have dopamine, and you have serotonin. Those are the big ones. You also have adrenaline and endorphins. But the three ones that really impact sort of your day-to-day behaviors tend to be oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine. So dopamine is a quick hit. If you eat a piece of chocolate, if you do drugs, if you have a drink, if you watch a video that really resonates with you and you're like, yes, I get it, or makes you laugh, you get that little hit of dopamine. And I think what's happening a lot with social media, in my opinion, is that we're becoming dopamine addicts. And that's part of the skip. No, I don't have time for that. I got to get past it. I got to get to my next little hit of dopamine. And if you look at, there's a whole science behind like casinos, for example, slot machines. They use a lot of the science and the neuroscience behind how slot machines get people to continually engage in social media. They've adopted a lot of this technology to keep you coming back for more. They want you to continually want that next hit of dopamine, that further engage, get more engagement, move on, hit a like, hit a share, do all of these things, see how many people are following you. All of that is really encouraging this sort of your next hit of dopamine, if you will. That being said, it's easy for you to start to acquire a value because it feels really good in the moment. Dopamine feels great and it feels easy. And it feels like I'm on the right path because it's sort of this little sense of euphoria. That's a really good indicator of an acquired value also. When it's easier to go along to get along, when it is sort of this sense of gratification, there's probably something underlying that you're starting to acquire. Your core values are what lead to lifelong fulfillment, and they actually give you more serotonin in your brain, which serotonin is the chemical responsible for when you feel proud of yourself or you feel proud of your children. Though that's that hit of serotonin that you're getting when you do something for somebody else. and you connect with somebody, you can also get that serotonin. And when you act out of your core value, you're going to get more of that. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy at the moment. So this is why it's easy to get mixed up, because when you're acting out of your core values, it might be hard. It might actually take energy. You may be exhausted and you're not really in the mood to have to do this one more thing, but it's worth it in the long run. When you look back over your life at the things that were super easy and you got that instant gratification, you don't get that recurring sense of excitement. That high wears off. But when you look back at the things that you did that really were meaningful to you, no matter how hard they were at the time, you feel good about yourself. You feel that motivation come back. You want to do it again, even though it's not going to be easy.
That's very enlightening. What you just, for you, that's an everyday thing. But for the rest of us out here that hear all this connectability of these things, it's pretty darn enlightening when you start looking at your day and going, that was just me 30 minutes ago, right? So it helps you kind of start to put the puzzle pieces together. And I got to tell you, that's this podcast for me it's been huge, from the sense that I get to have discussions with people like you that are experts in your field, and you get to shed these light on these things. It's like being at a doctor's office all day almost, right? And getting these shots of really great information and then looking back on your day and going, boy, Heidi talked about that earlier today. Right? So now you're forever stuck in my brain.
Good. I'm glad. It's a good earworm to be, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, gosh, that was like really, really good information. And if in the audience you didn't catch all that gold, well, you just weren't freaking paying attention, because that was very enlightening for me. Obviously, just because the questions were kind of loaded for my own self a little bit. So thank you for that. And, to kind of transition this thing is, one of my major missions is to help, startup companies. And I love to help startup companies. They're horrible clients for us because of their life cycle and how we do work as a company. But I do tons and tons of give back programs for startups. And part of the reason for this podcast is I wanted to build almost like a Rolodex of business struggles, right? That a young business owner could start at episode 1 and, go all the way through to where we are today and go, my gosh, that's 50 some arrows I don't have to take today, right? And so in that vein, what's a business struggle that you've went through that you could go back and tell your younger self, this is going to happen and here's how you're going to fix it?
Well, I would love to go back to my younger self, even before business.
Yeah, sure. I think we all would.
And I would tell myself that planning is worthwhile, but plans don't last. I spent a number of years as a project manager, and I would put so much effort into these grandiose plans, and literally minutes after the plan was approved, the plan was wrong. And I remember before going into project management, how frustrated I would get when I'd put a plan together. This was my course, and it wouldn't work out the way that I wanted to. In fact, I can give you a quick example. When I was in college, the guidance counselor that I went to see actually told me I didn't have to take a class that I needed to take, and it set me back an entire year. And I was very angry about this for a very long time. But I think if I had known the process of planning is worthwhile, but the plan itself has to change. It has to evolve because you don't know what you don't know. I think that could have saved me a lot of stress and a lot of regret. And I would have been mentally prepared to be flexible. The more I know, the better I can plan.
Yeah. And in business, I always say there's a lot of things that you should do just in time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Instead of, well, I got to put a big business plan together. I got to do all these things. I'm launching this new product and doing all this stuff. And then I run it out to its absolute perfection, right? And then the market says, we don't want it.
Yeah.
And now you have spent, hell, some people spend years doing this, right? So it's like, plan to scale, not to fail, right? And a lot of that is doing things just in time, right? And I know I tell our clients that all the time when they come up with these grandiose ideas, and it's like, okay, put the brakes on, trigger. Let's maybe do some of that just in time. How about that?
Yeah, from a project management perspective, we could even call it rolling wave planning.
Yeah.
You plan this much because you know enough to be able to plan, and the rest of it's a little fuzzy. And when you get there, you make that plan.
Yeah. Well, hey, sometimes fuzzy's not a bad thing.
Exactly.
Well, that's for sure. Well, Fuzzy Wuzzy was a bear. That was a really bad joke. Anyway, that's only because I have a 3 and 5-year-old that popped in my mind. So,
I just know he doesn't have any hair.
Yeah, that's true. That was the badoom ching part, I guess. So, well, great. That's a good piece of advice for sure. Well, I always like to ask this question kind of in closing things. It's a bit thought-provoking. I've had every answer from Gandhi to Jesus to my kids to, Steve Jobs to Warren Buffett, you name it. But if you could have picked somebody that could have came on the call with us today, dead or alive, mentor, friend, whatever the case may be, that you could ask that one burning question to, what would the question be, and who would have you chosen to be here today?
This might be one you haven't heard before. Admiral Rickover.
Okay.
He was the admiral that actually launched the nuclear development program for the nuclear submarine back in the late 40s and early 50s. And the question I would ask him is, what would he do differently? He undertook an incredible feat trying to take what was technology known for a weapon and turn it into a source of power in a way that would really guide a whole fleet for many, many years. And I would love to know what he learned along the way and what he would do differently now with that knowledge. Yeah.
That's a good one. And that's a deep answer too, right?
I'm sure he learned a lot.
I'm sure he did too. It's like a lot of people will say like Steve Jobs, right? And I always, Steve Jobs was a genius, right? But I don't think he was a genius from the space of the guy that did it, right? I think he like woke up one morning and put his headphones on with his Walkman radio and popped his tape in and went, I'm tired of this. And he went to work and he said, I want you to put all of this stuff into this little machine that can save like 800 songs. Now go in that room and don't come out until you figure it out. That's how I think that went.
And I'm pretty sure that's how it went with Rickover too. I want to put this in a submarine to make it go. Let me know when you figure it out.
That's right. I'm going to put 20 of you people that are smart into a room, and you're not going to get fed until you come out with an answer.
Milwaukee, Idaho, until you figure it all out.
That's hilarious, for sure. Well, hey, Heidi, how do people get a hold of you to tap into this genius that you have? Because I've learned a lot here today. So.
You can reach me through our Science2Wellbeing website. And my email address is Heidi@Science2Wellbeing.com. You're more than welcome to reach out to me either through the website or through my email address. I'd love to chat more about values and business and all the things.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Heidi, thank you for taking the time to be here. We all obviously are very busy. You got probably 20, 30 irons in your own fire. So I appreciate you taking the time to spend although a few minutes with me today.
No, thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
All right. Well, hey, thank you for joining today's War Room Moments. Remember, dream it, believe it, and then go achieve it. And don't make excuses, make progress. This is Jason Miller, your podcast host, signing off.
Thanks for listening to War Room Moments with your host, Jason Miller. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we'll see you on the next episode.